Hi, everyone. Welcome to Three Bone Theater's YouTube channel. I'm Tiffany Bryant Jackson, the education manager here at Three Bone, and we are opening our brand new season in just a few weeks. So it's time to talk about our upcoming show, the Lehman Trilogy. I have today with us our artistic director and the director of the show, David. I want to give them a quick moment. You should know Robin by now. She's been on a few conversations, but I want to make sure I give David a moment just to let us know who he is. Of course, you can read his bio on the website, but I want him to describe himself in a couple of words that he wants to live forever in YouTube land. Good morning, everyone.
Good
Good morning.
morning.
Good morning.
All
Thank you
right,
so much.
David, I'm going to put the pressure on you first off. Tell us about yourself.
Great. Hi, I'm David Winitsky. I am a director and developer of new plays. I live in Philadelphia, where I'm a rabid Philadelphia Eagles fan. And most importantly, I am a husband and father. My kids are 22 and 19, so I am in a new part of the parenting cycle, but really very proud of those boys. As a theater maker, I spend most of my time on new plays. So this is a great departure for me to just look at a text that already exists and has already been proven, and I'm enjoying it quite a bit.
I love that. Side note, and I know your kids' ages. My kids are the same age, David. We could talk about that one day. I want to dive into this show, kicking off our new season. So, Robin, you are very much a part of what we bring in. So, I want to hear from you why we chose this particular piece to kick off our next season.
Yeah, I think this piece, I'm so excited for lots of reasons to bring this piece to Charlotte. I think, we read probably now between like 30 and 40 shows a year to pick our 4 that we're going to produce. And this show is kind of similar to when we did Oslo, in the sense that this is the show that swept the award season in 2022. And so it was on our radar from that. And we sat down to read the piece. It is a behemoth of a script. And I fell in love with the script. I think that the way of the story being told is so focused on storytelling and on the actors' performances. There's 3 actors in this piece that spans 150 years of family history. They play dozens and dozens of characters, and it really reads like a long poem to the audience. And it's there's just something that's so lyrical about it, so epic about it, that we just, from a writing standpoint, felt like, oh my gosh, this piece is just so kind of huge. And we also were really interested in this idea of talking about stories around capitalism, around what does it mean to tell this story in Charlotte, that is a banking city, and what that looks like, having those conversations. And, knowing that it is, kind of the creme de la creme of the theater season last year, just wanting to make sure that that's presented in Charlotte, right? That our audiences deserve to see a beautiful production of this. So, then we set about trying to get the right people in place to make that happen. And David was a big part.
Brings in David. Now, David, you mentioned you primarily work in new shows. So tell us about getting this script, reading it, and thinking to yourself, yes, got to take this one.
Absolutely. I think, first of all, this play is a bit of a gravity-defying act. It is a 3-hour prose poem about financial history. And when you think of it that way, it shouldn't work, but it does. It's really a beautiful piece of language. And that was something that was really attractive to me. The original play was written in Italian. It was by an Italian playwright, then adapted by a British playwright and the director Sam Mendes in London and then New York. And so it has a kind of old school form, right? And an old school love of language, which is really, really lovely. I do spend most of my time on new plays all due respect and all love for the playwrights that I work with, our theater, our contemporary American theater, is not always so invested in just the beauty of language and the flow of language. Not all playwrights, but I think we have a much grittier and a much more realistic approach to the theater. So that was attractive to me. And then there's also something, my day job, what I mostly do is I run a company called the Jewish Plays Project. We develop what we like to call 21st century Jewish theater. So I think a lot about Jewish representational issues on stage. And this play is very much about a Jewish family, right? This is about the Lehman Brothers family who came to the US as observant Jews and continue to be observant Jews. And that is a really interesting place, because I think what it's doing is something that has happened very often in the American theater, which is that it's looking through a particular Jewish lens at a very American story. I think this story ultimately is about the sweep of America coming of age, and it's looking at it through this particular lens. And that's just a place that I'm really, really intrigued by and interested in how we represent that, how we tell those stories, what the complex interplay is between Jewishness, between Americanness, certainly in this play between Jewishness and the financial sector. That is a complex and fraught connection over time. So there's just so much in here that really attracted me. And because the play is just written as this poem, it doesn't tell you a lot about how it should be done. You can look at the very small number of productions of it that have been done so far. One of the things that was really exciting is just to get to do this play so early in its life. There was its original production in New York, there was another one in Boston, and then pretty much us, though I think maybe there's somebody in Chicago right about the same time. But it's very, very new. And so it's completely open to say, how are you going to do this? And that's just really an exciting directorial challenge.
Thank you. And you mentioned something that I think I would love to dive into, not think I know. So we talked a little bit about Jewish identity coming in and the mix of everything else that's happening, America coming of age and all the things. In that history, it's not clean. There are some things we don't talk about. We don't talk about Bruno. We don't talk about the beginning of America. So I'd love to hear your take on how you were approaching what can be deemed as problematic issues within the show, and how you want to make sure you're not really hiding it, but how you are taking care and how you are presenting it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that I think it's really important to recognize that the play talks about, but doesn't delve deeply into, and I think partially because it was written by an Italian European playwright, it's not an American writer, but the Lehman fortune originally was made on the cotton trade in the US. The Lehmans were not plantation owners, but they did trade cotton, and they made their money in Montgomery, Alabama, trading cotton. So that is just true. And the play is light in its treatment of what that means. And what slavery might mean. You know, when the Lehmans started, they were poor immigrants struggling to run a store. They found a way to make some money. They were, I think the play at least presents them as kind of as baffled as anybody else about what the fact that there was slavery in the 19th, you know, this is the mid 19th century, right, where there hadn't been in Europe for so long. So it talks about that, but it does not dive deeply into that. And I think it's important to recognize that. And the play has been taken to task a little bit for that. It's had, I actually became aware of the play at first because a colleague of mine at the Huntington in Boston that was doing it was telling me about some complications within the artistic staff at the Huntington, where some of the Black artists were saying, hey, didn't we kind of say we weren't going to do these stories that don't talk directly about this anymore? And there was a lot of conversation around that. And then my colleague was saying, hey, didn't we also kind of say we weren't going to do stories that on some level lead the Jewish American story with the capitalist story in the US? And I think all of those things are true. I think all of those things are valid critiques. I also feel like our approach to the play is to, first of all, be respectful to all those things, to be honest about them, to put the cotton plants on stage and not allow us to forget that as we move through it, to put the Jewishness on stage, the fact that their observance, their faith, was a part of who they were, and it wasn't what guided them to their financial life, but it was a part of how they lived their lives and the values that they brought to the family company that they were trying to build. So all of those things, I think it comes down to awareness, context, and sensitivity. Are you taking these things seriously? I have seen many. I have seen things in the past, coming from and looking at things from the Jewish angle, where I'm like, I don't know that somebody really understood. And actually, I would, if I was talking to Sam Mendes, I would say, Sam, I don't think you really understood the Jewishness of these characters. I don't think you understood what they were about. I hope that we're bringing a different context to it and bringing some different understanding to how we're presenting those characters. But I welcome the conversation, right? I don't think we should shy away from difficult conversations just because they're difficult. And I don't think that we should shy away from things that are true. I mean, the Lehmans were observant Jews. They were also financiers. They were very successful financiers. They were very ambitious financiers. All of that is true, right? And so what we have to grapple with is what that means and what values we can take from that, rather than just to say, oh, that might be problematic, we should never say anything.
Bring up a good point. I do know I spent a lot of time in DI spaces, as does Robin, and the intersection of people is very important and often forgotten. And so I think this show does a really good job of having us remember that people are more than one thing. I am more than my faith. I'm also more than my job. I'm also more than my role in my family. And what does that look like? And in a story like this, over years, what does it look like? And how does that build in a family? Robin, I'm interested to hear what you want as someone coming to see the show. What do you want them to take away with them as they're seeing this show?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to echo so much of what David shared, I think that we always produce stories that we see as kind of messy, because I think that's the world that we inhabit. And so I think having these conversations up, out loud about that there is no perfect art, and that it's meant to elicit a response and to help us have really hard conversations. I mean, that's what our whole mission is about, is like using this theater to serve as a catalyst for those conversations. I think that's my hope from this piece, is right. Like, what conversations are we having after we see this? I think, I certainly want our Charlotte audiences to like bask in the epicness of what they're witnessing in terms of just the theatrical feat of the show and the story. And I think that will happen. But I think there's a lot of interesting conversations to happen around wealth, around like you were saying, that there's so many different identities represented in the show. There's so many, we all have multiple identities as well, ones that we hold dear, and others that are sort of projected onto us. And so I think just exploring that in conversation, I think having the conversation about what did this play make people think about, who's not in the story. I think all of that is my hope for this piece, is just to really have a conversation around the power of storytelling and what this can, the conversations that this can start.
Yeah. And
thank you. And this is
go
ahead.
If I could just pick up on one thing, like I think what Robin is talking about multiple identities and what you share is like, again, this is subsumed in Americanness. I think this is a very American story. Yeah. And for me, I'm hoping that, as Robin also said, here in Charlotte, in a banking town where that is a thing that is happening, that we should all examine through this play our role in the capitalist narrative of the last 150, 160 years. Like I think that's really important, especially in a moment where we all know that capitalism is having we're having some questions at the moment, right? It's not always working out the way we had hoped, and I think that's really important for us all to think about that together.
Thank you. I was just going to plug in there. This is a great time to remind anyone who's ever been a part of our audience and new people coming on board, you don't leave the show without having prompts for further conversations. So just a quick reminder, one of our goals, and my goal specifically, is to make sure the conversation continues post-show for as long as you want. My favorite thing is running into people who saw a show last year and was like, oh my God, so I went home and I read this thing or I watched this thing because this show still sticks with me. And so just a reminder, when you leave the show, you do receive a discussion guide so you can have a conversation with yourself, with family, with loved ones, but also there are lots of resources for reading and watching. So if you are curious, a curious mind, you do not leave this epic show empty. You're already filled with what happened in the show, but you're given resources to fill your cup a little bit more. I'm trying to be a good steward of everyone's time. So I'm gonna go rapid fire, okay? Rapid fire. Start with you, David. Why does someone need to come see the show?
Because it matters to them. Because this is, as much as it is a family story, it's their story. It's an American story, and I think everybody needs to hear it. And because who doesn't need some beautiful poetry in their life?
Yes.
Amen. Robin, why does anyone need to come see the show?
I think just to see the artistry that is going to be displayed from our designers, our director, to our actors. I think just to witness that, most of it is local talent. Like, it's gonna be awesome.
I'm also to plug in, if you have been with Rerun from the beginning, you know where we started. So when you come see this show and see all that goes into this production, you're gonna be like, I remember when they were at that bar doing shows, and where they are with this grand scale of a show, which is telling a story. I think you're right, David. It is everyone's story. And I think that's what we miss a lot as we take on stories with different focuses of different people. We forget that that's still our story. It's still our history. We may look different, we may have different faiths, but it's still a part of where we are in this world. It's very much a part of where we live in Charlotte. It's very much a part of the South. It's very much a part of America. So I'm going to remind everyone the show opens the first weekend in November. You've got 3 weekends to catch the show. Trust me when I say go ahead and get your tickets in advance, because every time there's something that sells out and someone goes, oh man, I didn't realize. This is your warning. Get your tickets now. Bring your family, your friends. It's worth seeing and it's worth discussing. I want to thank David and Robin giving me some time this morning to talk about this show. We'll be back with our community partners soon to talk about their take on capitalism and how we're closing the wealth gaps in our next video. But again, thank you everyone for tuning in this morning. And I hope you come and see the show. I better see you in the audience.